Alright guys, in this video we're going to be looking at the steering on a white outdoor lawnmower. It's made by MTD. A lot of these mowers are very similar, but the problem with this one is we have no steering. We can turn in one direction but not the other. So stick around and I'm going to show you what to look for and how to make this repair. You can see that in one direction the steering wheel does absolutely nothing, but if we try to turn it the other, it does actually pull the wheel just a little. The first step in this process is to remove the belt on the mowing deck, because we're going to need to lower the mowing deck out of the way, and the way that you can do that is to pull your tensioner pulley back and then slip the belt off of the front pulley, off of your clutch assembly. And that is the first step. And now we are going to remove the pins that hold the front of the mowing deck. To remove the mowing deck, you'll notice that you have got two pins here on the front. There's one here and then there's one over here. What we're going to do is remove these pins first by pulling out the cotter pin that holds them in, and once you get the cotter pin pulled out of the way, you can simply pull the pin out of the way that is here holding in the deck. You can see this one is it's a little bit tight, but you wiggle it around, you might actually have to tap on it a little bit, but you can get these out. They're not usually wedged in there. It's also a good idea if you will lower the mowing deck all the way down once you get to this stage. That way it kind of helps take the stress off of these pins. That's one of the things that it does when you have the mowing deck lifted. There is a little bit more stress on these pins, so if you lower your mowing deck down, it will help to relieve some of that stress. Once you get those pins out of the way from the front bracket, the mowing deck support will drop down out of the way. And for what we're doing with this is going to be as far as we need to go to take this mowing deck off. There is pins in the back as well as the lift mechanism for this mowing deck. But to give us access into that steering, we will be able to get to that just by raising up the mower and leaving the deck hanging in place. Guys, I had to use just a little bit of ingenuity to get the mower up as high as I needed it to, but I've got it resting on some concrete blocks. But this isn't something that I recommend you do. Those of us who have been doing this for years, we all say don't do it, but we end up doing it ourselves. I just had to have a few more boards to get it up just a little bit higher. But as of right now, I can let the jack down, move it out of the way, and the mower is just up on some blocks, and it will be plenty stable for us to get underneath there to do what we need to do. You want to make sure that you set the brake on these and shock the tires, because even though these things are nowhere near as heavy as a car, you still don't want it falling on you. And once you have it up on the supports, keeping the wheels from rolling is a great way to keep it from falling on you. These concrete blocks, it's not going anywhere. Those things aren't going to give way. It's plenty strong enough to hold this. However, when we get down here trying to get the parts loose, we're going to be moving it back and forth some, and if we're not careful, we could actually roll it off of the blocks. And trust me, folks, when I say that hurts. Even though these things don't weigh that much, it's still, when they fall on you, it does not feel good. Alright guys, I wanted to show you all this so you get a little bit better understanding of what's happened. apparently it looks like there is some play in this shaft. You can see what we have here. So it appears that the bushing or whatever that's supposed to hold this shaft still and keep it pressed up against this, it looks like it has probably failed. So what we're going to do is try to get in to see what we've got to do to replace it. I've loosened this nut using an 18mm socket and ratchet. So right now I'm about to pull it off. As you can see, it's spinning off just fine. And once I have that nut down, the sprocket itself I can pull right down. And there's also a washer up here as well. That washer is actually back behind this. So we may end up having to remove this piece as well. Alright guys, once you get that bottom nut off of the bottom of the steering shaft, that steering wheel will pull right up out of the way. Now don't forget about your bushing and your washer. Now those will drop down, so you might want to make sure that you do not lose those. And our bushing that is supposed to keep that from bouncing around, I can feel it just setting right there. So I am going to see if I can get it worked over to where I can grab it. It is kind of in a tight spot. Okay, just about. Here it is. This is probably part of the problem. We're going to investigate it a little bit deeper, but it's a good possibility that this bushing is part of our problem. Okay guys, you can clearly see that this bushing has had it. You can see how we're just so much thinner here than what we are over on this side. I'd say that this is the reason why that the steering has gone out on this mower. I thought I'd show you all a quick comparison between the old components and the new ones. This is the bushing, or what is left of it. You can see the wear on it, how thin this has been wore down compared to the new one. Let's put them side by side, or I'll just set it over top of this. You can see that there's a significant amount of difference between these two. I mean, there's just, you know, after years of service, this thing has finally just wore out. Here is the sprocket, the original sprocket, and you can see that that these teeth are just wore down quite a bit as well. So a combination of this bushing and this sprocket being worn out has, you know, that's why we have the problems with the steering that we do. So the new ones, we are ready to begin installing those. To get a little more room, I'm actually going to remove this front shroud from the mower. There's just a few bolts that hold it in. One here, there's a Phillips screw down here. There's also a bolt in here that will need to be taken out, as well as the ones on the other side, and then disconnect the harness for the lights, and this shroud will be able to be moved out of the way. Don't forget to grease the bushing before you put it back into place. Also add a little grease to the steering shaft where it will be mating with the bushing, especially on the shoulder. You will also want to add grease to the sprocket as well as a little bit to the washer. That way everything has a good lubrication when it goes back into service. So once you get the bushing slipped back into place, which it'll take a little bit of jostling around underneath the mower to get it back into place, you can drop your steering shaft back in, and if you have the bushing located just right, the shaft should slide right into the bushing. There are a couple of sections in the plate of the bottom part of the frame of the mower that the shaft, you'll have to wiggle it around a little bit, and usually when you get it close enough to slip through those, the holes in that bottom plate, that it will fall right in place of that bushing. And once you get that done, you're ready to reassemble the bottom half of the steering rod. Before you assemble the lower half of your steering shaft, don't forget to make sure that you line the steering wheel up correctly. It should be straight with your tires. You can just kind of step back and judge where it needs to be. It doesn't have to necessarily be perfect. It's just kind of my thing. I like to make sure that the steering wheel sits straight on these whenever I reassemble it. Alright guys, we now have the lower sprocket put back on, and you can see compared to what we had earlier, currently there is no play in this with the new bushing and the new sprocket. We're going to just make sure that everything has a good coating of grease, especially in here between this. This is something that periodically, whenever you do any kind of maintenance on this that requires you to get underneath here, it's a good idea to put a little bit of grease on this, get it cleaned up, put some grease on it. It'll help it last a little longer. But no matter how much maintenance you do on these things will eventually wear out and have to be replaced. Alright guys, we have everything back together. The steering is completely reassembled. We also have the cover back on. We've got the mowing deck back on. And we are ready for the fun part now, which is mow the yard. So anyways guys, thanks for watching the video. I would appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up. Also leave me any comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.